Hey, welcome back to another video. It is time to dive back into the pages of the Sonic comics to talk about a weird thing they did one time. Previously, we discussed Sonic the Chili Dog. I promise I really did just say those words. And while this story isn't that kind of insane, it definitely deserves a spot among the more out-there moments of the Archie series. We're jumping all the way to issue 62, quite a few years off from that last story, which was in issue 11, so there has been plenty of plot in between, but thankfully most of it isn't super relevant. However, I want to at least set the stage as to what was going on leading into this story, so you've got some context for this. The evil wizard Ixisnagus, after having escaped his exile in the Zone of Silence, had briefly possessed Sally's father, King Acorn, in order to conquer Mobius. Upon being discovered, he escaped, heading off to find the power he needed to control the planet, with Sonic and Tails taking on the task of locating him. The duo end up on a world tour of sorts, leading to a few locations, but the one we're concerned with is Sandblast City, a city out in the middle of nowhere that Sonic and Tails crashed near after Nagus, disguised as a storm, disabled their plane. And that pretty much brings us to our focus today. Anything else that might need some brief context I'll explain when we get to it, but that's largely what you need. So let's just dig right into Archie Sonic numbers 62 and 63 and the two-part story, Icon. The story begins with the aforementioned crash, and just as Sonic is pointing out how totally screwed they are, they're met with a group rolling up in a Mad Max adjacent truck and a couple of tanks. The group, led by Jack, the one-eyed jazz jackrabbit lookalike here, are aware of Sonic as his general heroic exploits have led to him being known all over Mobius, and in particular his total defeat of Robotnik inspired them to take up arms against his remaining forces and drive them out of the area. Yeah, at the time it was actually true that Sonic had completely rid the world of Robotnik, as he had been completely erased from existence thanks to the events of the recent Endgame storyline. Obviously, this didn't stick around, but Endgame and Robotnik's return are really stories for another time. Jack and his buddies decide to take Sonic back to their town, and on the way they're assailed by a pack of Robians, which a helpful editor's caption explains/reminds us are roboticized Mobians. Robians were a pretty regular thing in the comics of this era, partially thanks to Sonic's parents and his Uncle Chuck being Robians for a solid chunk of the run. Post-Robotnik's demise, most of them could act on their own free will again, but the Robians in this arc are more typical of what Robotnik made them. That is to say, violent, not especially friendly, and equipped with laser eyes. Sonic leaps out to deal with the Robians, with Tails wondering why these ones haven't regained their free will like the others. I can't immediately recall if this got a proper answer down the line. I don't think it did, but either way, it's not entirely relevant to this story. Sonic returns to the vehicle after handling the Robians, and is then struck silent by the appearance of Sandblast City. Can't exactly say I relate, because this one single panel at the end of the page doesn't exactly portray any majesty or anything. Upon arriving inside the town, Sonic is showered with praise by the citizens.
Quite the little celebrity, aren't we?
Though both he and Tails are unsure as to why he's getting this level of reception. Jack then takes the two to the most important spot in town, which turns out to be a giant statue of Sonic, and Jack muses that with the real Sonic around, Sandblast City might not need the force field they've been using to keep out the Robians anymore. The next morning, Tails awakens to find that the door to his and Sonic's room is locked from the outside, but Tails is able to leave the room by flying out through the ceiling. Soon, he stumbles upon Jack covering up the plane, claiming that sand had clogged up all the instruments, but that they'd cleaned it as best as they could, and decided they'd keep the plane grounded for a few weeks. Tails obviously objects to this. They've got an evil wizard to track down after all, but Sonic figures that sticking around Sandblast City for a few weeks should be fine, ending issue 62. Issue 63 opens with Sonic enjoying the pampering offered to him by a couple of women who look very out of place alongside the more standard Sonic designs, while Tails gives a recap of the last issue and tells Sonic that they need to talk. Left alone in the room, Sonic and Tails start arguing about whether they should leave or not, with the two women deciding to eavesdrop, and Jack comes in to reveal, mostly to the audience really, that they don't plan on letting Sonic leave, ever, which you probably could have gathered. That night, Sonic wakes up Tails and explains he already figured out something fishy was going on, and that he was just going along with it so the people of Sandblast didn't realize he was onto them. Masters of stealth as they are, Sonic and Tails are caught basically as soon as they set foot outside, Jack telling them that there's no escape from the city so long as their force field is up. The two then split up, with Tails going to the plane to start it up, while Sonic goes to find the controls for the force field so he can deactivate it. Tails is able to reclaim the plane in a laughably easy way by dropping a tarp on the guys guarding it. I know Jack told his goons not to hurt Sonic and Tails, but come on, they could have at least attempted to stop Tails from getting the plane back. They don't even try to move out of the way of the tarp, they just stand there and let it happen. Sonic rolls around at the speed of sound all over Sandblast City, but can't find the force field controls until he thinks back on some of what Jack said, and realizes that the controls are inside the big Sonic statue. So Sonic guns it to the statue and absolutely obliterates it, lowering the force field and greatly angering Jack, which is fair, I'd say. Jack vows to destroy Sonic, but before he can get the chance to do anything, the Robians attack, since there's absolutely nothing keeping them from getting into Sandblast now. Sonic makes tracks, speeds by, and is saved just in the nick of time by Tails, and the story ends with them flying away as they look back on the city under siege. Yeah, that is how this story ends, with our heroes leaving the populace of Sandblast to be torn to shreds by Robians. Sure, they tried to keep Sonic captive, but it's still a bit extreme if you ask me, and pretty solidly one of the most dickish things Sonic ever did, even if he didn't really have a choice. Even Fleetway Sonic never did anything that bad, as far as I can recall anyway, and that version of Sonic was a real asshole most of the time. I've often used this arc as something of a punchline to show off a truly out-there moment of cruelty from Sonic, but it is worth mentioning that this wasn't the end of this whole ordeal. Issue 70 was the first to touch on this again, through its backup story, Statue of Limitations. In it, Sonic has a recurring nightmare about flying over Sandblast City when his plane vanishes, sending him falling directly towards the giant statue of himself, the statue laughing at him the whole time. Normally, he wakes up before he reaches the statue's mouth, afraid of what he'll find on the other side, but this time he lets himself fall in, where he's met with a land that worships him as unto a friggin' deity, almost, like the people of Sandblast turned up to 21. A lot of this serves as a spotlight of readers of the comic, with this council of archivists blabbing out lines that I would bet money were grabbed right from letters sent by fans of the time, but that's not totally related to the point here. The nightmare ends with the archivists saying that they believe Sonic can do no wrong, those words echoing as Sonic wakes up. In a discussion with Tails, Sonic laments that he just left Sandblast City to be attacked by the Robians. Now, this ultimately doesn't amount to that much, and Tails just tells Sonic to think about the people he's helped and that he doesn't need to be perfect, and that's enough to get Sonic out of his little funk, but I do like that they at least acknowledged that it was kind of a messed up thing for Sonic to do. Sandblast City got another name drop in issue 97 as the place of origin of Sonic's very temporary alter ego, the Sneak, but it wasn't until issue 119 that it would physically appear again. This story doesn't actually feature Sonic in it, but rather it's focused on Bunnie Rabbot. While answering an SOS call, Bunnie is blasted out of the sky and ends up in a cell in Sandblast City. Jack explains that the call was meant to trap Sonic as revenge, but Bunnie works just as well since she's one of Sonic's friends. Jack's method of revenge is fitting, I suppose, immediately sicking a group of Robians on Bunnie, which she fights for a few panels before we cut to the outside, Jack assuming that everything's taken care of.
I'm going to leave them alone and not actually witness them dying. I'm just going to assume it all went to plan. What?
Naturally, he's immediately proven wrong when Bunnie tunnels up out of the ground with the Robians following behind, leaving Jack and his cronies to be attacked by them once again as Bunnie flies off, none the worse for wear. And for a good while, that was it for Sandblast City. It didn't appear again, it wasn't mentioned, and neither Jack nor any of the inhabitants of the town got any kind of acknowledgement. We would eventually get another trip to Sandblast well into Ian Flynn's run on the book in the Thicker Than Water two-parter across issues 217 and 218. 7 years since the city's last appearance. The actual contents of this story are a little outside the scope of this video. I was already kind of pushing it, covering those last two that weren't actually part of Icon, and the Sandblast gang really aren't a major part of this story, but it is another instance of the town showing up. One thing I do want to bring up from this story is that it mentions that the Robians were eventually returned to normal, and the citizens of Sandblast outright terrorized them for ever having been Robians until they were run out of the city and essentially forced to go back to Eggman. So yeah, the people of Sandblast City are just the absolute worst. Jack and the rest of the Sandblast crew would show up one final time during the Chaotix Quest arc in Sonic Universe, but if Thicker Than Water was outside the purview of this video, then Chaotix Quest is on a whole other continent. The focus of this arc is really about Mighty trying to track down his missing sister, with the Sandblasters just being a small part of that. Though it does feature yet another example of Jack sucking hardcore, with him ordering a missile launch to try and take down the sub-boss of the city, knowing full well that it will endanger actual children to do so.
What a shit.
Now we got a slight bit off track there, but that is the story of the time Sonic left a city to die, and the handful of reappearances it had afterwards. Like I said, not as outright batshit crazy as that Sonic the Chili Dog thing, but still one of the more noteworthy, unorthodox stories to come from the Archie comics. At first, you almost feel bad for the people of the city, even if they did try to keep Sonic prisoner, and that's the main reason I bring up this story when I talk about weird Archie stuff. But with the later stories showing just how much the Sandblasters suck, maybe they kinda deserved it. Or perhaps it was their hero leaving them to die that eventually brought out the worst of them, and they weren't so bad initially. Probably not, though. There's no earthly way of knowing, and it really doesn't matter anyway, especially considering all of this got wiped out by the post-Worlds Collide reboot. That's going to be it from me. I hope you have a great day, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is for you, and I will see you guys next time.
I'm out of here. Bye.